There are so many wedding planners and wedding blogs out there telling you the proper way to plan your wedding. But the thing about all of these traditions is they're pretty old and outdated, and they also just don't really make sense anymore. I think as millennials, we're starting to realize that the way that things always have been done may not necessarily be the best way to do them. But for some reason, we just haven't applied that thinking to the wedding planning process yet. In this video, I'm going to cover what is the bad advice that's coming from all of these different sources being offered to / forced upon brides. And I'm also going to share with you some ideas on how to make these things more fun and more personal and more meaningful to you, so you can incorporate them into your wedding if you really want to, but that it actually means something to you. Hey blushing brides, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kyle James. So I started putting together today's video and I realized that there's just so much bad advice out there that I actually had to split this into 2 videos. So this is part 1 and there will be a part 2. So be sure that you are subscribed if you're not already so that you don't miss when I post that second video. I want to make sure that I'm covering wedding planning advice and inspiration that's actually helpful to you girls. So please let me know by giving this a thumbs up and also leave a comment as well if there's something specific that you want to see or that you want to see more of. All right, let's talk about all this bad wedding planning advice that's floating around out there and some ideas for what you should be doing instead. The first bad wedding advice that I keep seeing a lot of, and it's actually very surprising to me that this keeps coming up, but it's that you have to have an open bar. So having an open bar is very expensive, but the other reason that I'm really not into it is it's a good way for everybody to get too drunk. I think that if you just do beer and wine or just specialty cocktails, or even cash bar, that kind of lessens the amount that people drink, and I think that the party is a lot more fun. A lot of wedding planners and wedding blogs and stuff are kind of making it seem like open bar is expected, but that is definitely not the case. I prefer the option of doing just beer and wine and maybe a specialty cocktail if your budget will allow for it. But also don't worry if you need to do a cash bar. I think that it's much better to just do a cash bar and leave the option open to guests if they do want to purchase alcohol, instead of just completely having a dry wedding. If you've seen any of my videos, then you know that I am a pretty big stickler for the budget. I think that it's super important to not spend more on your wedding than you can afford because you don't want to start your marriage out in debt. And so if cutting out the open bar is going to help you to start out your marriage in a good place financially, then by all means you should definitely do that. The next bad wedding advice that I see floating around on all those wedding blogs and from some wedding planners is that you have to invite all immediate family members. An immediate family these days can be very, very big actually, especially with people getting remarried and there's kids and all this stuff. And I think that the only people you should invite to your wedding are people that you actually know and love and want there. The experience of your wedding day is going to be very different if you have people who you don't even really know or really talk to, versus having a very intimate, close group of people who you know and love. I have an entire video on who you should invite to your wedding, and I will link that below. But yeah, go ahead and ditch the advice that you must invite all immediate family members. If you have 1,000 cousins that you don't even know, there's no reason to be paying $100 a head for them to come to your wedding, and they're probably not going to really be offended if they're not invited anyway, if they don't know you and you don't really talk. The next piece of bad wedding planning advice is that everything has to match or be in your colors. I feel like a lot of brides stress themselves out trying to pick the perfect wedding colors, and they only pick specific colors and everything has to match that. I'm definitely all about like having a theme and like creating a great feel and a beautiful party, but I don't think that you have to pick very specific colors and stress yourself out to stick to those. I love color palettes that are like shades of blue or shades of green, so that it gives you lots of options and it all ends up actually tying together. It just makes it a lot easier when you're trying to find bridesmaids dresses and stuff like that. If you leave your color palette like kind of open and just have like an overall broad theme that you're going for, it'll be much easier to find stuff. And also when you find stuff that you love, you're not gonna like stress yourself out trying to get it to be perfect in your colors. And I think this especially goes for bridesmaids dresses. Mix and match bridesmaids dresses are so in, and I think they look so amazing and they make so much more sense, because the same dress just isn't going to look amazing on every single girl unless your friends look pretty much the same, which is usually not the case. So give yourself a more open palette so that you have more room to create something beautiful and less stress. The next piece of bad wedding advice that I've been seeing a lot of lately is that you have to either invite all kids or no kids. If you have like a few specific, very close kids that you want there, whether they're in the bridal party or not, I think that it's totally okay to say no kids on the invitation and then tell the parents of those few kids that you want there that they're able to bring the kids to the wedding. Inviting a ton of kids to your wedding definitely changes the vibe, and if that's not something that you want to incorporate, this is your party and it's totally up to you, so do it your way. Another piece of bad wedding planning advice is that you should accept all the help you can get and delegate, delegate, delegate. I'm not saying that you need to do everything yourself. That's definitely not the case. But I think that it can get to where there are just too many cooks in the kitchen. If you include too many people in your wedding planning process, especially in the decision-making portions, you are going to be stressed. For the actual planning portion of the wedding, try to involve as few people as possible and make sure that you're keeping the main decision-making up to you and your fiance. And then if you do want to involve specific people, that's totally fine, but make sure that you only involve them in very specific tasks. So if your mom or your mother-in-law wants to be involved, I totally get it. I know I will want to be involved in the planning of my son's weddings, but make sure that they're just involved in very specific things. So maybe you just involve them in only flowers or only decor. And that way you don't have like 100 opinions coming at you from every direction in every single decision that you're trying to make. And then if you do need some help on the day of for the actual like setting up and everything, then I would make a list of very specific tasks that need to be done and write people's names next to them and give them very specific tasks. Don't tell like 100 people like come help us set up on the day of, or it's gonna be kind of a mess and it will be very chaotic. So just keep it very specific. Along with this point, I also have a video on things you should not DIY. I'll link that below and that might help you out with some of this as well. My next piece of terrible wedding planning advice is one that is getting more and more prevalent. You keep seeing it more and more as these new companies are coming out. And that is that you have to have a bunch of Susie Homemaker stuff on your wedding registry. I have an entire video on wedding registries, I'll link that below. But I think for the modern millennial woman, for the most part, unless you're me, for the most part, you don't need a bunch of home stuff for your wedding. A lot of girls already live with their fiance and you have a lot of things for your home. A lot of people don't even entertain or don't cook. And if that's the case, then do not waste everybody's money and time registering for a bunch of home stuff that you're not going to use just because all of these wedding registry sites suggested it. I definitely recommend registering for stuff that you actually really want and that you're actually really going to use, even if it's completely non-traditional. Like if you're into camping and being outdoors or something, then you should register for a bunch of outdoor stuff. Or if you want a fantastic honeymoon and it's just not in your budget, then register for that. Don't be registering for like a KitchenAid mixer if you're never ever going to bake. So like I said, this video got super long, so I am going to split it into 2 parts. So be sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss when I post that second part. And as soon as I do, I will link it at the end of this video so that you can just go right into it. Also, comment below with some of the bad wedding planning advice that you have been given, or even wedding planning advice that you're questioning if you actually need to do that. I will be posting new wedding planning inspiration and advice every single Wednesday, so make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Give this video a thumbs up and be sure to share it with your other engaged friends, and we'll see you next time. Happy planning!